It is now 5:04 p.m. and I call the meeting to order. Before we get underway, I just want to let everyone know that Councillor Hutra will not be joining us this evening. Councillor Ross and Connick are joining us remotely. I expect if I could just get a thumbs up to make sure the audio is working fine. Very good, thank you. And I think we've got Senior Manager McKinnon with us as well as our planner, Mr. Teal. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the agenda? Chief Dowdy.
I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and announce the Keelan Point has been our successful candidate for the Community Services Director position, which was vacated. We did interview a number of qualified candidates. Happy to have you on board, and many of you know him, of course. The force behind some of our more notable economic development activities in the last 10 years, such as Equitable Home, Light Up the Night, successful partnerships. So we're happy to see that expand and looking forward to success with full breadth.
Congratulations, Keith. Thank you for that. With respect to the agenda, if I could have a motion, Councillor Goetz.
Thank you, Mark Creasy. I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Anything from anyone? All good. All those in favor? Thank you. As you can see, we do have a public hearing slated for 5:30, so we will move on to some business prior to that for the next 20 minutes or so. Is there a preference for order, or if we go right into priorities?
I think we'll work and we've got Manager Hackett with us ready to present.
Very good. So whenever you're ready to go, the floor will be yours, Manager Hackett, with item 5.1 for bylaw 397.2, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Creasy and members of council. It's a pleasure to be here in person with you this evening to present consideration of second and third reading of bylaw amendment 397.2, which is an amendment to the Heritage Resources Committee bylaw. The bylaw amendment amends the Heritage Resources Committee bylaw to remove the council representative from the committee. And this has the effect of reducing the committee from 7 members down to 6 members. And the bylaw amendment also adjusts quorum from 4 members down to 3 members to keep quorum at 50%. Under the current bylaw, the Heritage Resources Committee, or HRC, is responsible for management of heritage resources funding, including grants, celebrations, heritage awards, and plaques. They're responsible also for making recommendations pertaining to incentives for municipal historic resources, municipal designation, or heritage alterations or demolitions. And of course, for supporting heritage management and planning in the community and for public awareness around heritage conservation. I know they work very hard at that role, and I thank them for their dedication and the help that they gave me in working on this report. In terms of the bylaw, council may recall that the report presented during first reading reviewed committee membership as well as looking at the role of the committee and the overall work plan. There was some information about a matter related to the bylaw in terms of the potential to streamline the demolition permit process for buildings over 50 years. And to do this effectively, the report recommended that. So just in closing, bylaw amendment 397.2 amends the Heritage Resources Committee bylaw to remove the council representative from the committee, reducing the number of members from 7 to 6 and adjusting the quorum to 3 members. The recommendation tonight, respectfully, that council gives second and third reading to bylaw amendment 397.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Hackett. Just in the interest of clarification, the back of your detailed review here, we have some alternatives, and I just wanted to verify with you that those alternatives, number 3 and 4, were not necessarily there to be in place of the other recommendations, but intended to augment them. And in order for those to be considered, they must be into the bylaw prior to the second reading. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor Casey, those are additional ones that council could consider. They weren't part of the first reading, so they would need to be.
Thank you. I think from my recollection is that was seen as very important from council that to consider the removal of the 50-year expectation for consideration of demolition. So if anyone would care to get things underway with the motion for us to consider. Councillor Jacobson?
Sorry, I apologize, Mike Reese. I'm having some technical difficulties loading, so I can't see the motions in front of me. But I do know in our last Historical Resources Committee meeting, there was just some concern from the committee that the total number of voting members have been reduced to 6, which would potentially create the opportunity for a tie vote. And again, I'm not sure if items 3 and 4 address this in the alternative votes, but they did request that that the amount remain at 7 and that an additional member, a large from the community, be added to the board, which I didn't think was unreasonable. Again, I apologize. I wish I had those in front of me to see that, but
Not a problem at all. I think that there's certainly a reason why we have an odd number of individuals on most committees where voting is a necessity. So I'm not sure what the overall number of this particular document puts forward, but I think that that's a very reasonable request for sure. Manager Hackett?
Mayor Casey, we could present a motion to amend to adjust the membership to 7 by adding an additional. So that's a motion. So it's not part of 3 and 4.
And thank you. And just so everyone makes an informed decision, currently we have, it consists of 6, or do we not have 6 members?
Currently, there are 7 members, including the council member, when all positions are, of course, some vacancies are not, but there's 7 positions, including and removing the council member roles.
That's okay, thank you. Councillor Vaughton?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Through to Councillor Jacobson. Did they give any input on their feelings for the identified buildings on the municipal survey place of interest being the ones that they would be looking at for when they come up for demolition? And not just, like, say, for example, if we move to 70 years instead of 50?
sorry, just so I understand.
That's, like, they do the inspection of the buildings. Right now, anything over 50 years, and we're changing that to this list. Did they show any concern about that in the meeting?
You mean the places of interest list?
Yeah, places of interest, yeah.
I believe what their concern was just that there was, they decided to discuss this at budget time. They just wanted to make sure that there was essentially a consistent support from council as time goes by to make sure that that places of interest list is updated so that it's always reflecting what's current. But other than that, I don't think there was a concern about continuing in that role.
With the list being their guideline instead of age.
Yeah, I think that would be, I think they would find that a much more suitable role and eliminate the need for a tremendous amount of visits that are frankly not necessary. Right? So, yeah, I think as long as that commitment is there for future councils to make sure that the list over time is up to date,
Okay.
that would be a much more palatable solution.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hibbs, is your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess, yeah, my question is in regards to that places of interest. So I was assuming it's not really quite clear to me, or maybe I'm just missing it. Are they still going to be going by the assumption that they'd be looking at buildings that are 50 years or older? Like what criteria are they using to even potentially identify a property as being something that might want to be on the list, I guess? You know,
So the places of interest, pardon me, Mayor, the place of interest was that was established from the Heritage Resources Steering Committee from before. And there was an extensive survey done in conjunction with the province to make that list. So that criteria has been done and set out. Those houses are on the inventory. Going forward, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure how they would identify how that is going to be added to it. I believe that would have to be in conjunction with the appropriate provincial authorities to do that. So.
because yeah, it has been a number of years, if I recall correctly here.
2015.
Yeah, so at least 10 years, or less 10 years. I just was curious because I guess if it makes it on the list and it's only 50 years old, fair enough, I guess, if the committee decides that it's, so I just, again, we go back to that 50 years criteria, whether we're using that or somebody else is using it, it seems really like not that long ago, honestly, like I'm almost that age, right? It's just that, you know, I'm not a heritage building, but all right, I guess you don't really know the answer, but that's.
Councillor Dalton?
I will make a motion that council directs administration to amend bylaw 397.2 to eliminate the requirement for the Heritage Resources Committee recommendations on demolition permits to only those buildings identified in the municipal surveys places of interest list.
Thank you for that. So although it's not worded the same, I think we all understand that that intents and purposes removes the 50-year expectation, which I think, in my opinion, is a far more appropriate way of doing it, to have it on a list of interest. I think that'll reduce the workload for NBC and more importantly for our staff as well, for dealing with some of these demolition permits and whatnot. And I'm certain that the dedication of that committee will allow them to keep it current and have those places of interest in the community, of which there are many, up to date and make things run far more efficiently. Councillor Jacobson.
Sure, just a procedural question here. We don't have to pass bylaw 397.2 first before we do the amendment?
We actually have passed first reading.
Okay.
So any changes for them to be considered would have to be moved and voted on prior to second reading. I expect that was your reason.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Does anybody have any additional comments on the motion as put forward by Councillor Gullikson? Councillor Ross, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. My apologies. So are we increasing it from 50 years to 70 to the, as discussed and with this amendment, or and also as Councillor Jacobson brought forth, are we then going to have another member at large to create that seventh member for majority rather than a split equal vote by and so forth?
Very good. Those are two separate items, both of which we can certainly entertain prior to second reading. The motion as it's read now effectively removes the age criteria from consideration for the demolition permits and puts it upon what's the acronym, the FOIL list, the places of interest list, which was seen by many as a far more effective way of managing those resources. Does that answer your question? Anyone else? All those in favor? I believe that was unanimous. Is there any appetite for consideration of other? Councillor Goldson?
Considering I made the first motion, I'll make the second one, that council directs administration to bring forward costs to update the municipal heritage survey and places of interest list for council's consideration during the 2022 budget discussions.
Thank you. Anyone with any questions or concerns? We'll call the question and all those in favor. And that was unanimous as well. Councillor Jacobson?
I'll move that council direct administration to amend bylaw 397.2 to replace the council committee member with a community member at large.
Thank you. Once again, any questions or input on that motion? Chief Dowdy?
I think that technically the bylaw that was given first reading does not have a council committee member on it, is that correct? And so just for clarity, I want to confirm that what you're suggesting is that there will be 7 members total, no council representative, and an additional public member from the first reading.
Thank you for that. That's exactly.
Section 6, subsection 2, then would be up to 6 members at large with the addition of the Houma District Historical Society representative, which means.
Thank you for that clarification. Anyone else? All those in favor? And that was unanimous. Councillor Jacobson, I'm sorry, I did not see your vote. Was it in favor? Very good. That was unanimous then. Thank you.
Second reading.
Yes, I was actually just checking my, I was just checking my clock, to be perfectly honest with you. Those were certainly items that, if in fact they were going to be entertained, which they were, need to be done prior to consideration of further readings. Councillor Hibbs?
Sure. So I move that council give second reading to bylaw 397.2 as amended.
Good. One more opportunity for discussion. Anyone? All those in favor? That was unanimous as well. That is within the purview of council, as you wish. Councillor Hibbs?
I would move that council give third reading to bylaw 397.2, I guess as amended.
You. Prior to voting, I'll just confirm with the administration, is there any other items for consideration with this, with respect to this bylaw prior to entertaining third reading?
No, I apologize for my earlier erroneous wisdom. That was that. Once we get third reading, that will be that.
Anyone? All those in favor? Pretty much a clean sweep. I think that was unanimous as well. Thank you, everyone. We do have 5 minutes or so, a little quarter one here. Yeah, I think that let's go to the. Well, not sure I do either. Sorry about that, everyone. Siri seems to be chatting with me. Item 5.5, the former PRL, which is the Parkland Regional Library Hazardous Materials Assessment. Director Thompson, that's your item, I believe.
It is.
The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. At the previous council meeting, council directed administration to proceed with hazardous materials testing at the former Parkland Regional Library building. That particular item is not included in the 2021 operating budget. So we have, administration has sought three quotes from qualified contractors to perform this work. The cost range that we received range from $1,100 to $9,670, with the higher number being the outlier. Two proponents were very close to the same, to the $4,100 number. Administration is recommending that council authorize an expenditure up to $4,100 to conduct a hazardous materials assessment of the former Parkland Regional Library building funded from the operating reserve.
Thank you for that, Director Thompson. So it's been a while since I've been involved with one of these types of investigations. Is this the kind of thing where it will be a cut and dry amount expectation, or is there a certain amount of unknowns, or what?
So what a contractor is looking for is materials that are hazardous, as defined by the occupational health and safety. We're looking for things such as asbestos, mercury, ozone-emitting materials, and other things that require special handling during demolition or major renovation. And the report that is generated will identify those materials so that they can be salvaged or handled correctly and not present hazards to the workers or be disposed of incorrectly into a general landfill when they should require special handling to dispose of it appropriately. So in terms of risks, there are still some risks in terms of there are certain tests, and it's up to the judgment of the contractor to identify the locations for the test. For things like, say, mold, for instance, where is it more likely to get mold, and they'll test the mold in certain areas. But it's entirely possible somewhere else in the building that they didn't test is still mold. Like that will never guarantee it by everything. But this provides a reasonable level of assurance to the demolitions contractor as well as the city that the materials that are there have been identified, but we can't guarantee everything.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm prepared to make the motion. Council authorized an expenditure up to $4,100 to conduct a hazardous materials assessment of the former Parkland Regional Library building funded from the operating reserve. Thank you.
You? Would have any additional input? We'll call the question then. All those in favor? And that was unanimous as well. Thank you. So in an effort to try and be on time for our public hearing portion, section 4, I don't believe that we will entertain the additional request for decision prior, and it's only within a minute or so anyway. So with respect to bylaw 405.2 and 400.35, the municipal development plan and these bylaw amendments for Mitchell Park. Yeah, we'll start. We have to read off what it's such a statutory part. They can. Very good. Very good. So it is 5:29, so I'm going to go ahead and get things underway for our public hearing portion. As mayor, I declare the statutory public hearing bylaws for 405.2 and 400.36 open. This hearing is held pursuant to sections 7, 8, 230, 606, and 692 of the Municipal Government Act 2000 as amended, and requests the legislative coordinator to confirm the purpose of this public hearing, that the statutory public hearing notice was advertised in the local newspaper, and that any written submissions received and not included in the public hearing agenda package are read into the record.
Mayor Creasy and council, the purpose of the public hearing is to allow the general public to provide input on amending bylaws 405.2 and 400.36 in first reading May 25th, 2021. Bylaw 405.2 proposes to assign future commercial use to the 0.7 hectare portion of Lot 4, Block 53, Plan 972-290, located at 6303 50th Avenue. Bylaw 400.36 proposes to rezone the same area to C4 Highway Commercial District. Per section 606 of the MGA requirements for advertising, public hearing notice was advertised as shown on page 3 of the agenda. In the Lacombe Express, Thursday, July 1st, 2021, and Thursday, July 8th, 2021. Mayor, Creasy, and Council, 5 written submissions were received. 2 of those have been included in the agenda package, and 3 will now be read into the record. Dear City Council and whom this may concern, after hearing about the proposed rezoning of the Missioner baseball parking lot, it has me very concerned and apprehensive. This area is currently being used, often I may add, for parking specifically for the Lacombe Dodgers baseball games and for the farmers market. If you take this space away, you will be taking away most of the parking for baseball games and farmers markets, which is relied upon having available, as well as taking away from our premier diamond. Also, there is a higher risk of any commercial building being built to be destroyed simply by the ball games directly behind this proposed building due to foul balls, etc. If it is at all possible to seek a different location for this required building, I highly suggest finding a different location to keep our most loved and one of the best ballparks in central Alberta intact. This ballpark draws many people from around Alberta, which means drawing in business. I want to see all of the ball players have a great ballpark that isn't taken over by a commercial building. There are great locations on East Highway 12 and on West Highway 12, where Triple O's is to build. There are great locations for something like this. Thank you for listening. Sincerely, Lindy. Good morning. It says good morning. This email pertains to bylaws 405.2 and 400.36 and council's consideration to sell current community space for a highway commercial building. I am opposed to this rezoning and urge council to seriously reconsider. I have read both bylaws in their entirety and the meeting minutes in which these were discussed. I disagree with many of council's points as to how this would be an improvement to the use of this space. This space is mostly used as parking for the Bill Douglas Field, one of the nicest ballparks in central Alberta, and of course, our local farmers market. The claim that there is ample parking in the area is not true, as I am sure local citizens would agree. The reasons to continue developing space for commercial use and to encourage growth in Lacombe's economy are valid. However, the need to protect our community spaces is just as important. This ball field is one of the first things you see when entering Lacombe. I grew up a few hours west of here, and every summer when driving through, I remember thinking that Lacombe was one of the most beautiful towns ever. I chose to move here and raise my family here because of that first impression when you get upon entering our community. I also wanted to raise my family in the type of city that Lacombe was. Coming from a small town, I really wanted the amenities that a larger center offered, while having the hometown community mentality. The associations and spaces of Lacombe's youth sports and groups are a big part of providing exactly that. As an active volunteer with Lacombe Minor Baseball, I hear from many other towns in the area how amazing Missioner Ballpark is. Anyone who drove by and through last weekend would have noticed a full parking lot every day. This upcoming weekend will have 2 minor ball tournaments as well as a slow pitch tournament, all happening at the Missioner Park. Sports tourism is alive and well at our diamonds. The idea that a new building will increase this is also not true. It will decrease the available parking, especially while under construction. Another commercial building in close proximity to current established businesses does not make sense either. In the bylaw, the type of businesses that would be approved are already in existence across the street. Liquor store, food, fitness facility, they all exist. With another commercial building already approved in the old Commerce location and the construction of Midway Center still underway, there are plenty of spaces within a kilometer of this site for investment opportunities, and many locations within city limit that could be utilized without the negative effects of taking away community space and green space. The suggestion to pave and mark the parking lot would be a good idea. Council should discuss other ways to find that revenue without selling more of our parks and green space. Positive impact that the community space has, as it is currently, far exceed any that are claimed in the bylaw. There are many families and citizens who use this space regularly. Missioner Park is a local gem and the envy of many of our neighboring communities. I was even told this last night in a game versus one of these such towns. This bylaw has had citizens and business owners speak out against it. The decision to hold a public hearing over live stream has made it very difficult for taxpaying citizens' voices to be heard. I hope that council considers the families that want to call Lacombe home just as much as they consider commercial investment. It is an election year and there is a large demographic of families who wish for community spaces for our children and their future to enjoy. Please do not sell this land to another strip mall. There are other options. Shannon Bruce. The third one. Please do not allow this strip mall to be built on the proposed location. A strip mall should be built somewhere, anywhere else in town. This parking space is essential to baseball access. It is important to keep this space available for youth and community. Brand Henderson.
Thank you very much. So just a reminder that all persons giving oral presentation today are to clearly state their name, and presentations are to be brief and to the point. The order for the statutory public hearing presentation will be as follows. On behalf of our development officer will be our planner, Greg Teal. Then those in favor, those opposed, followed up by any person deemed to be affected by this decision who wishes to be heard. With that in mind, I would ask that Planner Teal be put on screen. Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy, and good evening, members of council. I'm hoping that you see on the screen an air photo that looks like the site we're discussing.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. As the legislative coordinators noted, the bylaws are about amending the municipal development plan to allow commercial use in the two yellow boxes that you can see on the air photo on the screen, and corresponding LUB amendment to allow C4 district to be applied to the property, also to allow for a range of highway commercial uses in the two parcels that you see shown on the screen. The two parcels that you see, Lot A, Lot B, are approximately 0.35 hectares in size each, or 0.7 of a hectare combined. They are located along the west side of 63rd, which is basically this area here. This is a Petrocan. This across the north is the service road that parallels the south side of Highway 12. And then you have ball diamond number 10 to the west of the area in question and how that relates to some of the property lines. Some of the things I want to draw to council's attention to, I don't believe you've had a chance to see this drawing before, but we do show some of the dimensions on here in relationship to some of the features along or forming part of the ball diamond, such as the distance from the fence to the possible property lines if council approves the rezonings, approximately 10 meters of space. Farther beyond, you can make out the white line here about the foul ball line, There's approximately 29 meters of space between that line and the west property line. And then you can see some dimensions from around the ball diamonds, or sorry, the bleachers around 10 feet and around some of the existing signs. Your worship, the area does displace the 58, if approved, would displace 58 parking stalls, which is noted in the RFD attached to this particular item. The assessment by Stantec that was undertaken did a review of how much parking is available in the area in comparison to what would be needed if all the ball diamonds were in use. And it's fair to say that the supply is quite generous in this area, approximately 330 parking stalls outside of the area in question for the two parcels shown on the screen available, where the need projected is 192 parking stalls if all ball diamonds were active. There is an issue of displacement of the farmers market, which does occur in this part of the parking area, and I believe also occurs in the area that runs east-west parallel in Highway 12 at times as well. Mayor Creasy, since the presentation of the material at first reading, we did have the opportunity to obtain additional feedback from the public, some of which you heard read into the record earlier in the public hearing. A number of letters also attached for council's reading to the agenda that came in after the time that the RFD was prepared. In the RFD itself, you'll find the input that was received for the initial consultation prior to public hearing to the first reading, and also some of the public comments that came in following the advertisement. In summary, that input is on page 9 of the RFD, broken down into a series of themes that we've characterized. One of the concerns that we've heard through the public hearing process is the potential for land use conflict, largely in the form of foul balls leaving Ball Diamond 10 and striking properties, individuals, or vehicles that may be parked on the future commercial parcels. We've also heard the potential for a low quality of appearance in terms of the architecture or just the sightliness of the yards. If the rear yards are presenting themselves to the ball diamonds and to that green space that visitors may be attending to. We've heard suggestions that the proceeds of any sale could go towards improvements for other facilities, not just the paving of parking to offset some of the lost parking, but maybe improving pathways within the park space itself, connecting the ball diamonds or dugouts and bleachers area to the other parking areas that are available, or looking external to the site and building stronger connections to the trail system along 50th Avenue. We also heard concern about the, sorry, that is the other concern, about the need to provide additional connections to the park area generally, in addition to those wayfinding or pathway improvements that could be internal to the site. So making those stronger connections to the broader community and trail system beyond the park area. We've also heard, Mayor Creasy, opposition to increasing the supply of commercial lands, similarly to what you've heard in the letters that were read out earlier, in light of the overall amount of supply that's available in other locations throughout the city. And we've also heard concerns about the message being that the park spaces are up for sale in terms of those outdoor areas and activity areas not being given as high a value as commercial space. So those points of input, Mayor Creasy, are summarized in the RFD, and the actual full comments are attached to the RFD for council's consideration and review. In additional information in response to some of those, administration does offer some potential feedback if council is prepared to go ahead with the commercial use of this particular area. There does look like it'll be a need to look at the foul ball issue, and that may be a combination of looking at the layout of the sites upon development to see what is being exposed to that potential strike of foul balls, and could also lead to the need to look at netting along the entire west perimeter if need be, or boundary of the two parcels to prevent that conflict between the foul balls leaving the ball diamonds and going into the commercial area. In terms of the visual appearance of the site in the rear yards, or however it appears along the west boundary, certainly there are enough tools in the land use bylaw for that to be managed at the time of a development permit. Just because you're in the rear yard does not mean that you have a license to be unsightly. The Development Authority can require screen fencing or landscaping. In addition, as the vendor of the property, council can choose to use that tool to increase the standards above the requirements of the land use bylaw if so desired. In terms of the possible use of the sales proceeds, there are certainly a range of options. So it was noted in the input received prior to first reading being given that the Recreation, Parks and Culture Board may have a range of suggestions that their input could be sought to determine what those future improvements actually should be. It may be parking, maybe the pathways, or maybe the wayfinding signage, or maybe some other improvement within the park space proper. In terms of the amount of supply of commercial land, the city planning generally, when it comes to commercial spaces, spends a lot of time trying to make sure that there is a range of choice and supply within an urban setting to make sure that we're able to attract a variety of commercial investments of different sizes, different types to different locations that fit their needs. Rarely do we see public policy going the other way to purposely restrict supply in Alberta. We usually leave that part to the free market in terms of sponsoring competition and making sure that our commercial is in good locations from a potential land use conflict perspective, or just a function of our overall urban setting. In terms of the park space being for sale, administration points out that there are a number of plans that place a high value on open space and the contribution that it makes to urban settings. So certainly, because this issue is before council, does not mean in administration's view that all park spaces are up for sale. They are very much considered on a case-by-case basis, which does allow consideration of financial considerations with social considerations and trying to balance those in any decision that's being made. Your worship, Mayor Creasy, the recommendation from administration following the public hearing is to proceed with approval of the two bylaws to allow the commercial development to occur on the two parcels that you see on the screen. And that's achieved by giving second and third reading to bylaw 405.2 and then bylaw 400.36 respectively.
Thank you, Planner Teal. Just to refresh my memory, at the start of your presentation, you had suggested a distance of separation from the existing ball diamond and the proposed property line. Was that 10 meters or 20 meters?
Your worship, Mayor Creasy, I'll just blow that up so you stand a better chance of reading those digits. I'm hoping that worked and the screen's become much larger in the room that you're in. So down here between the fence line and the proposed west property line, it's about 10.26 meters. So that's approximately 30 or so feet. When we go further up here where we can see, and assuming the marking is consistent for that foul ball line, there's approximately another 19 meters between the fence and that line. So that gives you that total of 29 meters. So a little less than 100 feet between the west property line and the foul ball line.
And I guess one more item that I thought might be helpful. What would be the proposed setback of a potential structure from the property line, which would be, I guess, considered then the rear property line in this case?
Yes, Mayor Creasy. So along the west boundary, the setback would be an additional 20 feet or 6 meters.
Thank you. So just to remind council that this is the public hearing portion. Certainly, if there's any items that you would like clarified or whatnot, that is fine. We'll reserve our discussion for a little later under request for decision. Do we have any thus far? I don't see any hands up remotely, and then here. Thank you, Planner Teal. Appreciate that. We now have an opportunity for those in favor to speak. I will ask our legislative coordinator if we have anybody waiting online to speak.
No, there's no.
Oh, very good. Do we have anybody here with us tonight that wishes to speak in favor? I see none. So move on to those opposed, and as there are none waiting online, I will ask if we have anyone here in the gallery that wishes to speak in opposition. Mr. Palliser, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm sorry I showed up a little late for this presentation. I didn't want to go online, not a Facebooker. And I wasn't sure if it was open to the public. But I feel very strongly that there is no need for commercial development by our ball diamonds. We need ball diamonds and we need green spaces. That's why Lacomb's so well loved. Lacombe made it through this economy, oil and gas news, COVID, and people still move to Lacombe. It's a strong place to come. People really love it. And part of it is that drive into town, you see a golf course on one side, you see ball diamonds on the other. It's what we need in Lacombe. So that's all. That's where I'm coming from.
You?
And I agree with it. I'll just add, I agree with the fact that there are other places already prepared and ready for commercial activity. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition? In that case, I will ask if there is anyone that is deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard at this time. And just to be certain, has anyone joined us electronically? To confirm that was no. I see no hands in chambers. Just going to conclude the public input portion. It is now 5:52, so I will declare the public hearing for bylaws 405.2 and 400.36 to now be closed at 5:52 p.m. I think it would be prudent to move on to item 5.2 then at this time. So I think that our planner, Ms. Mateel, is standing by. And before we hand the floor over to him, Steve Gowdy, go ahead.
Mayor, Precinct Council, following the first reading of this bylaw, we received substantial additional public feedback, all of it negative. I'd say almost all of it negative. And following that, I think some good points have been made about the attractiveness of the community, like the need to preserve green space. However, there is still the need for the city to be in an agile position should opportunities arise. That is a position the city's found itself in the past, where opportunities have come up and available land has not been available. It's not been available. As Mr. Pallister and others have correctly identified, there are viable commercial development sites for the city right now, and it would be great to see those develop out and see those investments that have already been made. Yeah. With that in mind, what I would recommend is that you do pass, still continue to pass second reading in this bylaw, but to have the land available should the right opportunity, something very compatible and tailored to that site, become available in the future, but they do not proceed with preparation of the land for sale or any further development activity at this time. Simply pass the bylaw to create the lot. We can create the lot and zone it, put that on the shelf and have it. Future, which could be 10 years, 20 years, or never, but it's an option that yourselves or future councils will have should a compatible opportunity.
With that in mind, we had our legislative coordinator read some letters into the record. And I think that some might misconstrue some of those comments that would suggest that there was developments in mind, or this was being specific to care to speak to that.
Certainly, there is no specific development in mind, such as I think there's talk of a liquor store, a fitness center, restaurant. Certainly, I'm sure that good business sense and open competition would lead to exact mirror development being permitted. I think that there's opportunity there, whether it's something that would support that ball field in a different way, support sports in the home. There has been opportunities that have arisen in the past for that sort of a development. It's compatible with an existing recreation site adjacent to it. And at that time, the city wasn't in a position to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. As you recall, went through a public process, which took a different turn than we had originally intended or expected. I think it was a great outcome. But it would be great in the future to be in a position to respond to those opportunities more quickly than we have in the past.
Thank you. Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Can we speak to that? What was just presented to us now?
Sure.
Thank you. I would just like to say that I like the idea of that. I like the idea of putting it on the shelf, doing that part. Can we also add restrictions to it? Because I understand there's already restrictions to that land because of the development across the road. Is that not correct?
There are select restrictive covenants that would have to be privately enforced, such as, I believe there is a restriction for a gas station.
I understand a convenience store couldn't go there either.
I do not have that level of detail right now.
That came from a citizen that wanted to do something up there and ran into those restrictions and had some difficulty with development. So I can say now that I'm against this, but if there could be restrictions put on it for the development to ensure that ball diamond isn't affected, that would certainly alleviate some of the concerns our citizens have. Because losing that ball diamond is not an option to a lot of them.
So just to be clear with that from the presentation that was made, specifically why I wanted Planner Teal to reiterate the setback different distances. The proposal of this in no way infringes upon baseball diamond itself.
Well, as far as the information I got from citizens that are involved with baseball, that it would be affected by the development as far as the playability and so on of that ball diamond. The foul balls going up onto the roof, it could potentially damage vehicles in the parking lot, those sorts of things. So, and I don't know that for myself personally because I don't play ball, but I've been informed that it could affect the use of that diamond.
Thank you. Chief Gotti?
So yes, you wouldn't be able to put direct development constraints on the land right now because that would be the role of the municipal planning commission. But you could certainly, as the owner of the land and arbiter of everything that we do, you could put restrictions on the sale of the land and say, this land is only available for sale to the right development. Anything has to be, it will have to come back to council. And then at that time, you could consider any proposal on its merits and add requirements or restrictions at that time.
Councillor Jacobson.
Sure, a couple comments. So I definitely support the CEO's comments of, regardless of the input at the moment, which I'll speak to, having an already subdivided rezone parcel of land able to meet unique opportunities as they present themselves is tremendously beneficial. It's a tremendously beneficial economic development tool to have, period. And I can imagine our new director would concur with that. And again, I want to stress, I have definitely read all the numerous emails that came to my inbox about this and read the comments, but I do have to comment on some things that I myself find a little bit strange or they don't resonate with me. Maybe someone can elucidate this for me. I don't understand how it would prejudice the ballpark to have a development there that they're worried about hitting foul balls into. I would think that would prejudice the development who would be worried about having balls hit the roof. I don't think anybody would expect that any team or anybody playing there would be expected to be liable in any way, shape or form for any foul balls that were hit onto the development. So that, I don't understand that. So if somebody perhaps explain that to me, because we seem to be considering that as a legitimate problem. Second, it's already used for a lot of parking during events. Is that not correct? So wouldn't all those cars also be at risk from getting hit by foul balls? And again, so I have a difficult time reconciling these concerns when we talk about there's so much parking being in there at these events, yet these cars themselves would be subject to foul balls if that is genuinely the concern. And then the final thing, the mayor made the point as well. I mean, nobody's talking about eliminating this ballpark. Nobody's even talking about obstructing the view. And if you look at the use right now, it's not even really a green space, it's mostly a parking lot. So I don't understand, again, this notion that we're destroying Lacomb's green spaces. I think that's not correct. But I do actually genuinely support the comments that came from the rec board about perhaps taking a bit of a closer look at the use of funds from this, if this ever goes through in the future. I think actually looking at increasing connectivity and walkability from some of the disconnected places would actually be something that would be very useful to look at. So those are just my comments on this.
Thank you. Councillor Nips?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I do appreciate CEO Gowdy's comments about passing this bylaw. However, I think that the whole ballpark, actually, if you do have involvement with baseball or softball for that matter, you've probably been to a lot of recreational facilities like that, and you will come to know how those areas are designed, and you will start to see some of the flaws in various systems. And I would suggest that as good as our facility is, that it actually is quite flawed in how it has decided to do parking. And I'm assuming that that has happened because it was developed over time. I apologize because I haven't been here through that whole development, but if you go to, I mean, I could list, so some of these are new, some of these are old, but Edgar Industrial, Great Chief Park, Sylvan Lake, Panoka, Blackfalds, All-Star Park, Leduc. If you go to facilities like that, you will find generally a centralized parking area. So I would agree with assessment from administration saying that there's ample parking on site, because there is. The only problem is you're going to have to walk to it. And now that isn't the expectation in our community, because of course you're used to having a parking spot right next to your diamond. But at most facilities, if you go, if you've never really paid attention to that sort of thing, you will see that good design will find that the parking has been set aside in a centralized parking space and they are not next to the diamonds. And that actually makes really good sense. Yes, you have to walk to the diamond that you're either spectating at or participating on, but it keeps your vehicle separate. So I'm not in support actually of proceeding with this bylaw at this time, only because I think that if we're going to start developing that area, I think we're going to have to start looking at the site as a whole and start looking at how we perhaps rejig some of those current parking areas to expand them and maybe eliminate others, et cetera, et cetera. The parking spaces that are there already are not being utilized to the proper way they are. Other areas are kind of jammed in there where I hope you don't have a game happening at both diamonds at once, because otherwise both rows of cars are at risk. Councillor Jacobson brought up the idea of that people are currently parking there when the ball diamond's in use. Yes, but for example, if you were there over the weekend where there was balls, like games being played, you will have noticed that on the parking lot that we're discussing in this proposal, all the vehicles were parked on the very far east side, and that's for a very good reason. Thankfully, I've never had a car hit, but I've seen plenty that have had that happen. So I guess I'm a little bit surprised that we didn't have a lot of turnout for the public hearing today. However, on the flip side, I would say that we, at least I, and I'm certainly that all the other councillors have received ample feedback by email, in particular, maybe phone call, for those of us that have worked at farmers markets. I know that was probably the single most topic that people were wanting to come over and discuss. Some not so happy at first, but once we got a chance to discuss it, I think we all came to an understanding. But I would definitely say that I've received a lot of negative feedback. I think that I do want to commend administration, however, for bringing this forward, because administration did exactly what council asked them to do at the beginning, identified in our priorities saying, identify assets that are underperforming. And I did read in some of the emails that I received kind of a misunderstanding perhaps of what an underutilized asset, or I don't know what the exact terminology was, but I think that they were meaning that to read that our ball diamonds are not being used to the capacity that they could be. And certainly over COVID, I would imagine that probably has been the case to some degree, but that is not actually why this has come forward to council. It came forward to council because we have property that could potentially be more than just a parking lot. It could be something that creates revenue for the community, essentially, whether it's sold off or is however it's being used to generate revenue. So that's an important clarification. Anyway, back to what I was saying before. I will not be supporting the bylaws, although it's not that I necessarily think that this is never a good situation. I think there's actually a lot of opportunity in this to improve the whole site, not just this one little segment as far as this property or properties that we're talking about. I think that this is an opportunity to improve Michener Park as a whole, to do that paving, to do potentially centralized parking, to really identify what features that recreation area should have. But that's going to definitely involve communication with user groups because they're going to be the most knowledgeable in that. So I really feel that this comes down to a situation, however, that aside, that the demand is just simply not there. We have a lot of a lot of properties right now that are available, some are being developed, but some are not. And honestly, it feels like there's not an immediate need, and it just seems to me, why would we be causing all of this trouble for just another open lot? I just don't feel that there's enough pressing need for it. So that's another reason I will be voting against it. But that shouldn't be, I just want to make it clear that it shouldn't be misconstrued as being, I would not ever support this. It's just I would not support this at this time.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I reiterate what Councillor Ipps says, as we as council gave direction to administration at the start of our term to evaluate underappreciating assets or areas that could be a benefit to development and so forth. This has probably been one of the heaviest issues of responses of this term, and a lot of emails, phone calls, and so forth. Obviously not one really in response from the community in support of it. So Diamond 10 is a diamond that you have some elite athletes that have a talent that can hit a ball hard. Past history of watching competitive ball, and it's and the user groups that are volunteers that contribute to our community as of our minor ball, minor soccer, and so forth. We all greatly appreciate that, but they have expressed their voice. I think if there was even lower caliber, smaller ball diamonds of younger age demographics categories where wasn't the balls going into outside of the area, I think it might even be accepted and supported by minor ball more. But we have people that are very passionate about our green space areas and our sports facilities, and I think at this time, like I say, I appreciate all the work and effort that administration's brought forth, that they were given the direction by council, but at this time, I think it's maybe just better to be set aside for a later time if it was an option, but I would not be supporting this right now.
Thank you, and I appreciate you bringing forth the volunteers, and wanted to remind everybody that our volunteers in the Home Recreation Board spent a great deal of time speaking on this very subject and wholeheartedly endorsed this process. So I think we need to keep that in mind as well. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. As you're all well aware, I voted against this at first reading, and I will continue to vote against it going forward. Since the day I've been elected, I've been talking about how we need to have more commercial development in this community. It's absolutely vital to the growth of this community that we have that occur. That being said, we've had unprecedented commercial development. One only needs to look at our building permits in that sector in the last couple of years to see that we've had a number of new commercial developments go up, and that's very encouraging. And kudos to this council, by the way, because we are responsible for, in some small part, for having that increase. So that's terrific. But there's a time and a place for everything, and this simply isn't the time for this development at this particular site. I would rather have the commercial developments we have become successful and fill out and flourish before we go down this road of identifying new commercial spaces. And there's many. I mean, you all know them. I mean, kitty corner from the movie theater. There's all the space downtown. Strip mall on the north end. The Lacombe Center Mall is under new management. Is going to be revitalizing that area. Midway, Tricon, where the Lacombe Chamber building used to be. I mean, there's so many behind Hannah's Seeds. I mean, we're looking at in excess of probably 36 or more commercial spaces or bays or whatever you want to call it that I think need to be filled out first. So I just think, as Councillor Hibbs has suggested, maybe somewhere down the road, but then we need to then reassess this entire area. I mean, you have to find the balance between recreational and commercial. And, if we're going to go down this road, we have to assess that entire area and say, okay, maybe the ball diamonds altogether should be relocated, but then we should have that conversation first and say, where should we locate these areas to, and have that conversation long before we start doing this one-off where we have these two lots here or rezoning that area at all. I think it's just not the time for it. And as for the place, as many have alluded to, we've seen so much feedback from the community saying that this is not the place for it. One only needs to go to a farmer's market or a ball tournament, or even a soccer tournament for that matter. You have the two fields there at Michener as well, where where you'll have parking overflow into that area as well. And I think it's just that area needs to continue to be utilized as parking. And again, I don't rule it out in the future, but even the suggestion somehow that if we do this now and then we put restrictions on it, I think that's a dangerous road to go down. I think we should just leave long enough alone. And if we're going to go down this road, then we need to assess the whole site as a whole and not do this one-off right now. So I continue to remain opposed. I don't think it's a good idea for this community going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connick. So just so there's no confusion for the people watching at home, this particular bylaw has nothing to do with a development currently. So this is for the possibility of a rezoning that may entertain that at some point in the future. If it became a discussion of moving ball diamonds or relocating them, I would certainly not be in favor of that now or in the future. I'm not sure how we went there. There was some mention in one of the letters that we received about this being disrespectful to the park signatory, which is Bill Douglas Field. Bill Douglas was a fine gentleman who spent many hours volunteering and contributing for our community. Even though he lived in the country, was not a citizen of the then town. Many of his descendants have lived in the city, and some continue to do so. I had an opportunity to speak with a couple of them, and they wholeheartedly endorsed this process and were even more on board, and was actually commended for us considering this as being a very creative solution to try and better utilize the space and generate some funds to enhance the park, as opposed to take away or remove the ball diamond, as some people have suggested that this is what this is about, which is certainly not the case. So while I can clearly say that this is not going to pass, I did want to let everybody know that. And I think this is a sad case of misinformation becoming extremely rampant on a subject that was clearly meant to enhance an area, not detract from it. I think that once again, the silent majority that we did not hear from see this as a positive thing, whether it be for the farmers market or for the creative enhancement of our recreation facilities. With that being said, I think we all know how this is going to go, but I did want that to be known that this was certainly not in no way, shape, or form intended as a money grab for the city coffers. It was meant to be funneled towards the enhancement of the area, and certainly not in any way, shape, or form meant to be disrespectful to who the park is named after, and very much appropriately so. Councillor Jacobson.
I move that council give second reading of bylaw 405.2.
Thank you. Anything further? All those in favor? Those opposed? That is defeated 4-2. Thanks, everyone. Item 5.3, rescind bylaw 244, removal of video lottery terminals. Director Piche, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before council this evening is first reading of bylaw 490. Bylaw 490 repeals bylaw 244, the video lottery terminals. Bylaw 244 is a bylaw to ban video lottery terminals in the city of Lacombe. A notice of motion was presented to council on May 25th, and the motion was voted on June 14th for administration to bring a bylaw to repeal bylaw 244 back to council for deliberation. In 1998, the Alberta government asked each municipality to hold a plebiscite to determine if residents support video lottery terminals in the community. At that time, the vote was 1,147 to remove video lottery terminals to 1,132 to retain video lottery terminals. As a result of that vote, bylaw 244 was passed by the council of the day to remove VLTs from the town of Lacombe at that time. However, since time has passed, section 240 of the MGA states that if a bylaw has been passed by a vote of the electors, it may be repealed by council if 10 years have passed from the date that that bylaw was passed. Bylaw 244 was passed in 1998. This allows council to repeal a bylaw with no requirements of advertising or a public vote. Now, that being said, administration does recommend that council hold some form of public consultation before deciding on an outcome for bylaw 490. Some examples of public consultation are public hearings, open houses, engagements with residents at various community events such as farmers markets and the Active Living Fair, surveys, social media discussions, and email polls. However, to have a definitive measurement of public opinion, the council could ask a question of the electorate at a general election in October. If it's formed as a question of an electorate to the electorate and not an actual plebiscite, then it does not bind council to the outcome of the vote. And this is found in section 236 of the MGA. At this time, administration is asking that council give first reading to bylaw 490 to provide direction of how they would like, and to provide a direction of how they would like to proceed with public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Konik.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. At this time, I'd like to give motion that council give first reading to bylaw 490. Thank you.
Thank you. Any process-related questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? That was unanimously in favor. Thank you. Councillor Konik.
Thank you again, Mayor Christie. I would totally agree that we need to do some sort of public engagement, whether that be, I noticed there's an alternative motion to schedule a public hearing. I would be in favor of that for sure. I know, I'll be at the farmer's market again this coming Friday. I think that's something we can maybe do up a little Sandwich board there, asking for public feedback on that as well there. But I would not be opposed to for sure a public hearing and whatever else we can do to get some feedback on that.
You? Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I've been thinking about this a lot since we actually brought it up the other day. The fact that nobody from the public, I mean, I guess I haven't brought it up in public either, but nobody from the public has been talking about this yet, but it's only because honestly, they just don't know about it. And I feel that this was such a big thing to put in that it should be kind of a big thing to take back out again. And I'm still of the mind, I think I brought it up the last time that we discussed this, about, I think we used incorrectly plebiscite, but I do feel that a question on a ballot would be the most appropriate way of getting feedback on this one. Because I do feel that this is a pretty big change for our community. I think I'm going to be in the minority among council on this, but that would be my preferred method. If we don't go that route, then I think we should definitely be having a full-out public hearing. But again, I'm concerned about trying to get that out to people over a summer. We've just kind of in the hopefully death throes of COVID. People are just, I don't know, they're just, this isn't great timing for this. It's a big change for our community, and I fear the backlash on trying to, pull a fast one on the community, whatever direction it goes. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just being overly cautious, but that is my thoughts on it. And I see that the motion has been left particularly blank, on specifically on purpose. And I'm wondering if it would just be prudent to just make a motion that we do the question on the ballot and see if council is in favor of that, and then work down from there. So I guess I would be prepared to make that motion if that's okay. And correct me if I'm using the right terminology. Is it a question on a ballot? Is that?
Question to the electorate.
Question to the electorate. So then I would move that council direct administration to arrange, schedule a question to the electorate for public consultation.
Thank you. Just wanted to reiterate the fact that you had suggested there was not any recommended motions, and that is
Yes.
certainly not the case, but you're certainly well within your.
I didn't mean it that way. I meant that the one on the front page was left blank in that we could choose what the method was. Sorry for my miscommunication.
Okay. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Through to Councillor Hibbs. I'm not sure we need to do that, but I would almost like to hear the public's input before making that decision, if that's what they want. And because I think it's a fairly big deal to put it on the ballot in the fall. And I'm not sure that's exactly what the public would like to see. And whether this is as much of an issue as it was originally. It may not be now. And it would be nice to have that public hearing or input from the farmer's market or coffee with council before we make a decision to put it on the ballot. That's my only, I'm not against it, but I just would like to have their input first before doing that.
Councillor Koch.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would agree with Councillor Gullickson. I would disagree, Councillor Hibbs. I don't think it's as big a change as you would think. I have had some discussions with people because I have brought forth this notice of motion, and I haven't heard anybody opposed to the idea. They're all in favor because, again, it's been some time has lapsed, and I don't think people think it's really a big deal at all to have VLTs in our community. I would agree with Councillor Gullickson. I think we should go around getting some public feedback first before we go down the route of putting this as a question to the electorate. I mean, because again, the feeling I'm getting is that it doesn't need to be an election or a question to the electorate. That's something that we can just go ahead and do. So I would certainly, again, be in favor of a public hearing and whatever feedback methods we can do, but I don't think going right straight to the question, because it's still, you're not getting any sort of, you're not having any sort of discussion at that point. It's just a question, right? So I would rather hear what people think first before we throw.
Thank you. Anyone else? So we do have a motion on the floor currently. And just so you're sure that the motion stands, Very good. So with respect to this being a question for the electorate, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And those opposed? That was,
Was there also opposed or in favor? I can't quite-
everyone was opposed but one, Councillor Gibbs. That is defeated. Do you have any additional motions? Councillor Connick?
I would so move that we schedule a public hearing at 5:30 on Monday, August 9th, 2021.
The audio was a little weak there, Councillor Connick. Could I have you repeat that, please?
I'm sorry, I would so move that council schedule a public hearing at 5:30 on Monday, August 9th, 2021.
Thank you. Any additional input? Councillor Gibbs?
I just have a comment that it's unfortunate that the city has had a history of making relatively large decisions over summertime. And this is potentially a situation where that will happen again, where people are doing other things and not necessarily all that engaged in their municipality, but just a comment. I still will support it because I think we do need to have a public hearing, but just a comment.
Anyone else? Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just further to Councillor Hibbs' point, I mean, we got quite a bit of feedback as it pertains to the previous bylaw that was defeated. So if people are opposed and they know this question is happening, whether we advertise it in the paper or on the radio or on the website, I'm confident we will get feedback or not as it pertains to this matter.
Anyone else? So with respect to the public input to take place at, or on August 5th, 5:30 p.m., or I'm sorry, August 9th. Can you read my own rating? That won't come as a surprise to any in this room, but Coordinator Belabono. Just so we've got the right motion, I'm going to have you reread it, please.
That council direct administration to arrange and schedule a public hearing for August 9th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you. Call the question then. All those in favor? Those opposed? So voted. Councillor Jacobson opposed. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Is there a way that administration could put together a sandwich board or something for the next few farmers markets, please? Just so we can, I mean, I know Councillor Gullickson is particularly good at corralling people to ask them those questions. So, but I think if we had some sandwich boards made up, just as we did for the previous bylaw, that would be terrific.
Those will be prepared for future farmers markets events for presentation to the public. Councillor Connick. Councillor Hibbs?
Just for clarification on our last item of business, to do with the two lots developed, I think we only did the one bylaw and we should probably deal with the other bylaw. Should I miss that?
If council so chooses.
We could return back to that. Would that be acceptable?
Care to make a motion? Sure.
Yeah, I would. That council gives second reading to bylaw 400.36, I believe is the bylaw that we have.
Thank you. Councilor Ross?
My apologies, Mayor Creasy, but I'm sorry, Councillor Hibbs, what was that specific bylaw that was pertaining to the development? Sorry, I would just like to know what I'm voting on more specifically.
At Mitchener Park, there's actually two separate bylaws, and we did the first bylaw that failed to pass second reading, but we did not address the second bylaw. That's to do with the same development, the same rezoning.
Thank you.
Chief Cowdy?
Just to be very explicit, but bylaw 405.2, which you would have declined second reading, is a bylaw to amend the future land use concept map within the municipal development plan. It is a requirement of the Municipal Government Act that any rezonings are compliant with your municipal development plan. And so that needed to happen prior to the rezoning. The rezoning bylaw is 400.36. It has been given first reading. There's, if a municipality fails to give second and third reading within 2 years, the bylaw is considered dead. However, Councilor Hibbs is absolutely correct. The most clear outcome would be a proposed second reading and then it being, in this case, you do have to deny it because legally you aren't able to pass a rezone that's not in compliance with your municipal development plan.
Is everyone clear on the intent of previously outlined bylaw 400.36 then?
I
Need a
read
motion?
that one.
Very good. So if we're all good on that, I will call a vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? Very good. And Director Thompson, next up is the Elizabeth Lake stabilization update, item 5.4 under request for decision.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Amber Mitchell, our Director Mitchell is, or Manager Mitchell is prepared to make a presentation on this item tonight, so if it's all right, I'll look forward to that.
Thank you, Director Thompson, thank you, Mayor Creasy, and good evening, members of council. Before you tonight is an update on the Elizabeth Lake and Boardwalk and Trail project. The goal of this project is to complete a loop around Lake Elizabeth and Lake Anne by building a boardwalk across the channel between the two water bodies and installing a natural trail along Lake Elizabeth adjacent to Rosedale Valley. In order to complete this loop, the owner of the proposed Rosemont Estates and Barrett Ridge development agreed to dedicate the environmental reserve land next to the lakes to provide room for the trail ahead of actual development. Stantec Consulting was engaged to complete the boardwalk design, legal survey for land registration, and the environmental studies required to obtain regulatory authorizations and approvals for construction. The environmental surveys and legal survey identified that rising water levels have severely encroached on the city's existing municipal and environmental land reserves. And as there is currently not an established outlet for the lake, the water level could continue to rise. This threatens the integrity of the existing trail system around the lake, and it also results in the need to increase the length of the boardwalk to ensure it remains above water long-term. Stantec also completed the water boundary review and wetland assessment required for the environmental land dedication, which revealed that the water levels have risen to the point where the current outline plan for Rosemont Estates and Barrett Ridge is no longer feasible as designed. If the city were to move forward with registering the new ER boundaries, it would start environmental reserve boundaries. It would establish a new normal water level at its current level for both Lake Anne and Lake Elizabeth. And this would be a regulatory barrier to lowering those lake levels in the future. There were 3 identified options for moving forward. Option 1 is to cancel the boardwalk and trail project and do nothing towards stabilizing the lake levels at this time. There is an existing culvert between Crana Lake and Lake Anne that was originally installed as an emergency overflow from Crana into Lake Anne. Historically, Lake Elizabeth and Lake Anne have always been lower than Crana Lake. In 2009, there was a difference of approximately 1 meter in lake levels. However, they have been steadily rising in Lake Elizabeth, and last October, there were within 5 centimeters of Crana Lake. Because the existing culvert was meant for emergencies and not intended to connect the two water bodies, it has been installed above the high water level. Lake Elizabeth would have to continue to rise another 0.6 meters before the existing culvert could provide a connection between the two lakes. If an alternative outlet is not provided and the lake levels continue to rise, they will eventually stabilize at this higher level, though during periods of high precipitation, the water may peak even higher. A rise of 0.6 meters will eliminate the majority of the existing trail, and much of the ER, the environmental and municipal reserves, will be underwater, which would prevent relocation of the trail on public land. In addition, it will impact private properties in the west and the south side of Lake Elizabeth. Option 2 is to proceed with the construction of the boardwalk and the trail project as originally proposed. In order to account for future high water levels, the boardwalk will be designed at a higher water level, achieved by connecting the lakes with the existing culvert as described in option 1. This will result in additional project costs of 30 to 50%, or approximately $230,000 to $380,000. In addition, the city must still acquire the land to complete the trail connection. Since the impact to developable land is significantly different than what was originally proposed on the 2014 outline plan, the landowner may not agree to proceed with land dedication at this time. The city could still pursue the option project to an easement or land purchase, but that would also increase project costs and is not recommended, as the land will eventually need to be dedicated to the city at no cost when the project, when the development proceeds. Option 3 is to create a permanent outlet for Lake Anne and Lake Elizabeth. This option has been on the 10-year plan for a number of years, and it has been deferred several times. A few options for stabilizing the lake levels have been presented to council in the past, and they are summarized in Table 1. These include option 3A, which is to lower the culvert between Cranna Lake and Lake Anne, and to lower the Cranna Lake outlet and a portion of the storm main in Woodland Drive. This option was not originally preferred, as it requires lowering the water in Cranna Lake by approximately 0.2 meters. This will cause the shoreline around Cranna Lake to recede by 2 to 3 meters. Option 3B is to install a stormwater pump station to regulate the lake level. This option was not preferred, as it has a similar capital cost to option 3A, but much higher operation and maintenance costs. Option 3C is a variation of option 3A, but it only includes the lowering of a culvert between Lake Anne and Cranna Lake. This option was not preferred, as it allows Lake Elizabeth to rise another 0.2 meters before it would stabilize. However, the lake level and shoreline in Cranna Lake would remain unimpacted. Option 3D had not been previously investigated. It involves a gravity outlet connected to the Elizabeth Park stormwater facility east of Lake Elizabeth. This option will allow the normal water level in Lake Anne and Lake Elizabeth to be lowered by up to 0.8 meters compared to what it was last October. The actual normal level will be determined by provincial regulators, so I can't guarantee a drop of 0.8, as they will have the final say. Both Stantec and Alberta Environment and Parks have noted that the city will not be permitted to lower the lake levels beyond the level that it was in 2012 when the last environmental reserve survey was registered. It is anticipated that the lower water level will be similar to the level of the lake in 2009, as shown on the attached figure. In 2009, Elizabeth Lake and Lake Anne were separate water bodies, and that has the following benefits today. Looping the trail may only require a modest boardwalk, if any, depending on ground conditions once the water levels drop, saving costs in constructing that final trail connection. Rising lake levels will no longer threaten the existing perimeter trail near the lake. And finally, current Alberta environment restrictions do not allow the use of Lake Elizabeth for development without an adequate outlet. With an outlet, Bowert Rouge and Rosemont Estates have a potential path forward to incorporate Elizabeth Lake into their stormwater management plans. If developments were permitted to use Lake Elizabeth for stormwater management, a portion of the outlet could potentially be recuperated through offsite levies. The Lake Anne and Lake Elizabeth Boardwalk and Trail project currently has a budget of $761,500. To date, $26,500 has been spent on preliminary engineering. Due to the uncertainties associated with the rising water levels, administration does not recommend proceeding with the boardwalk at this time. Table 2 in your memo summarizes project costs and the additional funds required and what lake levels would be achievable with each option. So for option 3A, which is the gravity outlet to Crana Lake, which includes lowering the main in Woodland Drive, the project cost is $838,000. And we would be able to lower Lake Elizabeth by approximately 0.1 meters from what it was last October. Option 3B is the stormwater pumping station at a cost of $800,000. And that the level we'd be able to lower that is dependent on regulatory bodies, but potentially you could probably get up to that same 0.8 meters of option 3B. Option 3C is to only address the culvert between Lake Anne and Crana Lake, and that's at $430,000. And several of you might be looking at that project and saying it's a simple culvert, why is it so expensive? The fact of the matter is we have to still do all the regulatory and environmental approvals and studies for lowering the culvert as we would for the full outlet, and so that's why that cost is so high. And it would actually result in the lake rising 0.2 meters before stabilizing. And option 3D, which is the preferred option, is a gravity outlet through an existing stormwater management facility in Elizabeth Park. That one is priced at $1,090,000, but does result in that lowering of up to 0.8 meters. So it is the most expensive option, but it also has the most benefits to the existing trails. It significantly lowers the cost of finishing the trail in the future, and it provides a potential pathway for approvals for the Bowery and Rosemont Estates development. If council proceeds with an option that requires any of these options that require additional funding, administration will reallocate resources in the 10-year capital plan to bring forward for council's consideration during the 2022 budget deliberations. Option 2, which all three options for lowering the lake level require regulatory approvals, as does completion of the boardwalk. Those take up to 8 to 12 months to obtain after detailed design is complete. Sometimes when work in a water body must be completed, the Alberta environment dictates that it must be done under frozen conditions. If this is required, it is anticipated that construction could begin as early as January and February of 2023, with the remaining work to be completed in the summer of 2023. And then I also want to take a moment to clarify that in the memo, we state that a member of staff represents the city at the Central Alberta Regional Trail Society, and is actually a member of council that represents us there. With that clarification, I would like to open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Manager Mitchell, appreciate that. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Now, I noticed that I believe Vesta Energy was pumping water out of Barnett Lake recently. Are they continuing to do that right now? Do you know?
To my understanding, they are. That is an agreement they have with Macomb County.
Because I also see that they're set up now to take water out of Slacks Slough, I think it is called, where we're now pumping water from Henners, or we're going to have our storm water from Henners go through that slough to Bull Creek. And they're taking water out of there now. So all of this is all, would that all be connected? Like, once we do this project, like Elizabeth Lake will go over in that same drainage system, is that correct?
No, this will join the city's underground drainage system, and it will be conveyed directly to Wolf Creek.
Directly, it won't go through the slough.
It won't go through the slough.
So, and our storm waters can handle this additional load?
Yes, I believe that's some of the preliminary engineering that's being done, is to confirm that very thing.
And then the other question I have, would there be controls on this? So like and say, for example, we had a heavy downpour, you would be able to stop the flow of water coming out of the lake to allow the stormwater system to take the rainwater away and then start the lake drainage
So
to a later date?
You got it?
So typically what they'll do is use either a weir system or some sort of outlet control mechanism, whether it's an orifice plate or something else that will restrict the flow, so that it's actually, I use the term a trickle. It's a constant trickle there, and even if there was a big rainstorm, it would surge in Elizabeth Lake and Lake Ann, but it would maintain that sort of trickle flow out, so there wouldn't be a big surge that would be seen due to this.
Yeah, my concern is our existing storm sewers, as you know, sometimes they fail as far as the amount of water coming into the system. And if we already have flow coming in from the lake, it would just make it more susceptible to that in my mind.
Yeah, I don't know if I would use the term fail. They are designed to provide capacity in up to the 1 in 5 year storm event. And above the 1 in 5 year storm event, the system is designed to be an overland conveyance system. So you are correct, though, that 1 in 5 threshold, if right now they have 100 units of conveyance and there's a constant 1 being trickled through this outlet, you're down to 99. But it would be an incremental reduction in the available capacity. And in terms of the actual service reduction, those 1 in 5 year storms, those are modeled estimates at best anyway, and so you'd still be very similar to the system.
So this would be very minimal effect to the system.
Yes, perfect. It is an effect, as you correctly identified, but very minimal.
Can I ask a question? Did we notice any lake level changes with them pumping water out of Barnett?
we did notice lake level changes in Barnett.
Nothing.
The reaction, it's so hard to tell. This was a very dry spring. We didn't get a lot of rain, that kind of thing. So, and still the lake levels were up. I haven't had it surveyed in since last October. This is just purely visual observations, but the trails were wet this spring, even with a very, very dry spring, so.
I mean, when you look at all of the lakes, including the ones that we don't put any stormwater in, they're all up. They're all seem to be going up together. So it just seems that if we take water out of one, that may affect the others.
Did have Williams Slough, which is at least the term I know, for the slough on the way between Penrose Pond and Wolf Creek. We did have that surveyed this spring, and it was down, but as you mentioned, if there's pumping activity going on, that could contribute.
Yeah, they're just putting in pump in now, I think. So.
Okay, well, it was surveyed a couple weeks ago, and it was down significantly from what it was last fall.
So with this proposed piping that's outlined in 3D, then that, for all intents and purposes, it makes Elizabeth Lake into a stormwater retention pond. From what you've described, is that fair? Correct, isn't it? Anything else, Chief Gotti?
Sorry, just to make that very clear, yes, that is one of the benefits, is that it actually, Alberta Environment put a moratorium on development that uses that storm pond as a receiving body, precisely because of that. That previous development has been approved by the city and town, that to some extent did use that as an attenuation body, but without a proper outlet. And so this finishes that off, if you will, to make it a stormwater management facility, which absolutely paves the way for the development of Rosemont Estates at Bound Ridge. The developer and owner, which is Mr. Red Bound, with us this evening. I'm sure this is the item that he was most interested in this evening. And so I think that is an important point, that it does facilitate development, a centrally located residential
So, and Manager Mitchell, just to reiterate, the proposal for 3D was for a gravity outlet, so would it be fair to assume there's not a great deal of ongoing annual maintenance costs involved with this particular proposal?
Correct, that's why a gravity outlet is preferred, is the minimal ongoing operations and maintenance costs. And if I may speak to Diego Gaddy's comment earlier, it definitely enables development, but there still will be restrictions if people are concerned about stormwater quality. Those developments will still be required to pre-treat the water before dumping it into the pond, whether it be through an oil grid separator or potentially if the Berman lands develop in the future, we might look at a 4-bay for them, or even if and when Rosedale Valley becomes a part of our community, and if they're looking to develop stormwater, we do have options to use Lake Elizabeth, but we still will be required to meet those water quality, stormwater quality guidelines.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobson?
Sure. CEO Gowdy, did we have the 761,000 allocated for expenditure this year, or have we just put that in the capital plan for future?
Actually, it's, that money is comprised of carryover funds that were going back as far as 2017, I believe. And there's a variety of trail projects that roadblocks, and I'm not going to each one, but and so we consulted with the Parks and Rec board. They recommended those funds be reallocated and consolidated into improvement of Elizabeth Park, or the Elizabeth Park Trail. Once we've started looking into that, ultimately what you're seeing today is that we're saying, okay, now that we've looked into it, it's not as easy. We don't think it's good. It would be a good investment to go out there and make really $1 million investment into a trail that still actually is susceptible to flooding. You are seeing homeowners' properties that are being impacted by that rise in lake level, and you are seeing diminished development potential, again, in centrally located zones of the city. So once we have had a look at that and worked through some of the regulatory aspects of it, we're saying actually your best investment initially before you do any of these other things is to protect your existing infrastructure, make sure that the volunteer investments and capital investments that have been made are protected, and then look at what can be done. And in this case, we'll look at that. Actually, it makes it much easier because building a land bridge across muddy land is just much, much cheaper and more straightforward than a boardwalk is.
So to be clear, that 761,000, that's already been budgeted and
Correct.
so that's, for lack of a better term, available funds to spend.
Yes.
And I think it was specifically earmarked for this very area.
Yes, correct. Not just available, earmarked, essentially for this project. Again, we just said, well, there's some beginning steps that need to be done before you can go on to these other steps.
So if I can.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with all the reasons you put forward, and while I've never been tremendously in favor of this for a lot of reasons, I'm of the opinion that if we're going to do this, and I agree with the reasons, we might as well just do it correctly and have it out of our hair. So, I am prepared to make a motion that council reallocate 761,500 capital budget for the Elizabeth Lake Boardwalk and Trail Project to the Lake and Elizabeth Lake Stabilization Project, option 3D.
Thank you. Councillor Connick?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I believe Councillor Gullickson asked this question, but I didn't quite hear the response. So it will tie into existing stormwater lines, which will then ultimately make their way to Wolf Creek. Is that correct? I think that's what the reply was.
Yes, that is correct. Councillor Hibbs?
Yes, thank you. I guess my question then would be, so if we reallocate these funds to this project, that means that there will not be any funds left over for the original proposal, is that correct? So we would then be putting in this outlet but now no longer have funds available to proceed with the boardwalk project. That would have to be something that's kicked down the road further. Another question of clarification would be under option 3D, when it suggests that it could be 0.8 meters lower and has the little note there, Alberta Environment and Parks may dictate a maximum level, et cetera, et cetera. Now that little note appears to only be on that one option. Is that only available on that option, or are the other ones kind of up in the air as far as what Alberta Environment would allow as well? I have concerns that we would go through this, project and only end up achieving a 0.1 meter on it because that's what Alberta Environment decides is appropriate. And then we're not really any further ahead other than we've just spent a ton of money. Do you know what I mean? So I guess I'd like that clarification.
Well, that's a fair, that's what I think those elevation differences are because of historical water elevations, not necessarily tied to the method of addressing those issues. But I'll let either CEO Gowdy or Manager Mitchell address it further.
So the same limitation would exist on 3D and 3B, the 0.8 meters, the so-called historical levels. We are quite confident that it wouldn't be 0.1 meters, for example, because we do have these elevation photos from 2009, which are fairly reliable. And I think it would be hard for Alberta Environment to make the case that there should be a significantly higher elevation tolerated than in 2009. So I think the hedging that Manager Mitchell is bringing here is more along the lines of it may be between 0.7 and 0.8. It may not be exactly 0.8, but it would be 2 feet or more. That gives some level of assurance. The first question, you're absolutely correct. Funneling of money or not funneling, using the money for preparation of the project instead of just pre-work does lower the amount that's available for what we had originally hoped to achieve, which was complete refitting and upgrade of the trail there. To achieve that without the boardwalk, we're recommending or we're estimating an additional $355,000 will be needed in future years, which we will likely make the recommendation that we allocate from other unallocated MSI that the city has available. But that would be something that will come to you during your future capital budget deliberations.
But chances are that would not be expended towards a boardwalk. It would be more of a conventional trail system.
Yes.
Councilor Gullikson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Again, CEO Gowdy. Wouldn't environment pick the lake level before we did the sewer outlet? Because wouldn't that dictate the level of the sewer?
Yes, they will.
So, I mean, we would know that before we make our major expenditure anyway, right?
Yes.
Okay.
For sure. We would get a defined level.
Yeah, and we'll know if it's only 0.1 or something like that, is it worthwhile doing, right? Okay.
So there was some talk of various years in the lake levels that were historically there between 2009 and 2012. Was there a great deal of variance in those 3 years? I just wanted.
So 2009 was shown on all the figures because that's the last accurate survey we had of not survey, it was LiDAR taken of the lake level. And so that's kind of where we can semi-accurately show where the level was in 2009. 2012 was put out there because that's the last time land was registered with public lands. And so that would be the elevation that it was set at. Looking at Google Earth, if you look back at the historical photos, which you can see and which we really use to support our application to Alberta Environment, there's not a massive change between 2009 and 2012. It is slightly higher than what you see in the figures shown for 2009, but not anywhere close to what it currently is today.
Okay. And are we to understand that it will be based on whatever the value was in 2012 because that was the last registered elevation of the water body, or not necessarily?
So I've had preliminary conversations with Alberta Environment, and they indicated that that's the absolute minimum they would go, They also indicated that often they do require some sort of freeboard, is the term that they use, where they might, where I'm saying 0.8, they might say 0.7, they might say 0.65, to provide a few inches of additional increase for that lane beyond the last time it was registered. And I think the thought behind that is when it was registered, when the survey was completed, it's hard to say if it was at the actual normal water level, if it's low, or, so they had to events.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. If CEO Gowdy could further elaborate on, it was commented on that properties are being damaged by the high water, if you could elaborate on that.
So the city has actually completed some repair work on slope failures that existed in the rear of private yards in Elizabeth Lake. And there are other properties that have seen subsidence and actually slope failures, or the initiation of slope failures on the rear front of their lots, where they back onto Elizabeth Lake, where they might have been at the time of development 50 feet from the lake shore. Now they're 15 feet from the lake shore. And so that amount of water, the higher water, has less resistance to slope failures. And then the increased moisture in the soil also lowers the carrying capacity of the soil. And so you start to see slope failures on private lots right now. Director Thompson, do you have an idea of how widespread that is? Like I said, I know we actually worked with one landowner specifically. Do you recall the cost of that project, or could you give us a feel for how widespread this is?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Got one property backs onto the lake. We underwent repairs of the slope that cost the tune of $30,000. And we have an active insurance claim right now that's under investigation regarding another slope failure that we haven't repaired yet, but that's something that's being assessed. And then just looking at the number of retaining walls that have been developed in the state that they're in, it does appear that there is slope movement that has occurred more recently along around Maple Drive or Maple Bay, the Maple Bay area. In fact, the trail system there comes away from the private property of those lots actually goes down the slope somewhat, and the trail system has been diverted up onto private property in some cases to stay away from the lake level as well. So something that trail users could see firsthand using the south part of that trail.
Anyone else? Is anyone contemplating motion to move us forward on this item? Is it? That makes two of us. That makes two of us. Legislative Coordinator Bellamono, could you read the proposed motion aloud, please?
That council reallocate $761,500 capital budget from the Elizabeth Lake Boardwalk and Trail Project to the Lake and Elizabeth Lake Stabilization Project, option 3D.
Thank you. Anything further from anyone? All those in favor? I see none opposed. That is carried unanimously. There was some discussion with respect to the boardwalk. They feel it would be in the best interest to make a motion with that so that no one's under the impression that the boardwalk is still under consideration at this time? Or are we okay with the way that it sits now?
Clarify what you mean, I don't understand.
And some of the other motions, it suggested that it be eliminated from the budget. And this one we effectively have eliminated because of the excuse me, the reallocation of the funds But I think it could cause some confusion as there be an expectation that there will likely be a boardwalk in the very near future, which we have been told that is extremely unlikely. So does that help clarify?
I guess, yeah.
We're okay with the way it sits or no?
So at this moment in time, there would be no movement then on the next step. Right now, we're just talking about fixing the problem.
You got it?
Correct. And so the next opportunity for delivering the boardwalk project in theory would be at the capital budget. We would bring a modified project for trail improvement that would not be a boardwalk. And so you'd be free to deny that, approve it, or say add a boardwalk to it. So
I think that would be the appropriate time, so I would just leave it at that.
Thank you. And I guess just for further information then, would it be the intent of administration for council to deliberate over future trail systems there when it level has not been proven with the addition of this system?
I'm sorry, that is a very good point. Perhaps this year's capital budget will not be actually specifically at, because until we have determined the exact level, we won't know the extent of the project that's required. So
10-year placeholder perhaps?
yes, I'm sorry.
That's what I was thinking of.
I think that's far more logical. Very good. All right, Manager Mitchell.
And if I may provide one more comment. So with the regulatory approvals and whatnot, it'll be 2023 before construction can begin. It'll take another probably 2 years before that water level stabilizes. So you're looking at 2025, 2026 before you'll be looking at building that permanent trail connection. So we put that in the 10-year capital plan as opposed to trying to put something in this year.
Thanks, everyone. So if we move down to item 5.6, the request for expressions of interest for the former PRL building. I have in my version of the agenda here, that's presented by Manager Lapointe. And seeing how that person no longer exists, we will call upon Director Lapointe to present.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. This evening, administration is presenting the building revitalization request for expressions of interest process for council consideration. As you know, the property at 5404 56th Avenue remains vacant. While the building holds long-term strategic value for the city, finding ways to mitigate short-term costs remains a priority. The city previously used the building Macomb RFEOI process to facilitate ideas for addressing underutilized city property. The process yielded 3 viable opportunities for the city to pursue. Using a similar process, the city can feature the property at 5404 56th Avenue, which was not part of the original RFEOI process. The benefit is an open, fair, and transparent tool that allows the city to generate creative opportunities for the site. You have probably reviewed the timeline, but we're suggesting building walkthroughs would happen next week. Quickly thereafterwards, we'd be holding one-on-one meetings, and there's a submission deadline at the end of the month, like July 30th. Quick evaluation through to August 2nd and return to council on August 9th. The RFEOI contains a provision for the city to retain ownership of the land itself, thus securing its long-term benefit to the community. Preference will also be given to submissions that maintain the existing zoning, which is community service. Should council decide to move forward with the process, there would be an opportunity to gain new sale or lease revenue, reduce utility costs, and/or increase property tax generation. Administration is recommending council approve the building revitalization request for expressions of interest process as presented. With that, I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Director Lapointe. Anyone who care to start? Don't see a whole lot of hands, I guess. It's no secret that I was very much opposed to development of this space and saw it as a likely candidate for demolition. And that was for a variety of reasons that I went through in great detail previously. The things that I like about this proposal are the finite time period. I think 25 years, in my opinion, is a little long, to be perfectly honest with you. But I expect that will be the ultimate end of this building after a period of time, likely somewhere in the mid-range of that, of those numbers. And I certainly have no problem with a public entity making use of it during that time period. However, I want to make sure that the city is not in a position for any liability that's associated with it. And unfortunately, to rehabilitate this building by the municipality for municipal purposes is cost prohibitive, I would suggest, and not in our best interest. So this walks a line of acceptability for myself that I am more apt to support than the previous methods that we have entertained. Councillor Goetz.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make that motion that council approves the building revitalization request for expression of interest process as presented.
Thank you. So to put our administration on the spot, I will ask the question then. Do we have methodology in place to insulate the city from potential liability from a third party, what are we calling them, leaseholder, renter, I don't know what the correct term is, but third party user of this facility?
Yes, we have talked about several methodologies. Now, of course, it depends on the exact proposal that we receive and whether council ought to look at the merits of the proposals that we receive. And we'll certainly have that as an item of consideration. And we'll reach out to our insurer, depending on what those proposals look like, to talk about exactly that, ways that we can limit any sort of liability. And that if there is a remaining liability, that we are insured for happening within that area. Of course, as you know, no guarantees of anything. And the city being a fairly large institution, if there is something that occurs over there, I'm sure the city will face some sort of challenge. But yes, that is front and center for me as well. And one of the primary considerations as to how to make sure the city does not have liability for something that we do not have control.
Thank you. I do not see any hands up in person. However, Councillor Connick is joining us electronically and his video feed is not there. It's back on again. Councillor Connick, did you have any input?
No, Mayor Creasy, I like the proposal and the look of this, especially the fact that we retain the land. And yeah, let's go forward with this and see what comes of it.
Thank you. Any additional input from anyone? All those in favor? I see none opposed. That is unanimous. Thank you. Director LaPointe, you're batting 1,000. I hope that continues for a long time.
Thank you for 700.
We have no administrative reports this evening. However, there's several mailbox items for us. The Government of Alberta STIP program notification from June 28th. Questions or comments on that? And the submission from a resident regarding Innisfail train whistle, or train whistling article rather.
I have a question regarding that.
Certainly, go ahead.
Through to CEO Gowdy, how close are we to the railway crossings being done on the east? Because I understand that's our thing holding us back, is it not?
There's a couple of requirements at each one. I think most of them are minor signage or some cutting back vegetation. East is the main one. I believe we just received approval or notice of approval from CP Rail. They have received notice of approval from the Federal Transport Ministry that the grant application is made on our behalf. Approved. That's 80% grant. Improvements, which are estimated around 500,000 or so. So now it's to CP Rail to schedule and then complete the work. They usually do that through contractor forces. Unfortunately, I don't know what that looks like. I believe the Federal Transport Ministry just extended the deadline by 2 years for rail companies to meet the upgraded, accurate rail crossing guidelines. And so I would say by 2023 is their legal requirement. I'm hopeful that it will be sooner than that.
So would we be able to set up a meeting with CP, maybe, potentially, to try to do that? I mean, realistic, there's other issues besides this one with them, and then currently with the derailment on the south end of town, speeds through our community, and all those things are concerns. And I did hear one comment regarding the fires in BC, that now people are having, when a train goes by, they get all upset and think it's going to start a fire instantaneously, PST or whatever they call it, regarding trains. Post-traumatic stress syndrome due to trains going by. So, I mean, it's getting a little ridiculous, but I mean, could that, with the derailment, speed of our trains, 85 kilometers through town, those types of things that can address those issues.
I'm confident that we can get a meeting to discuss those issues.
Thank you.
We have a letter from Anoka Council regarding the idea that rural municipalities are in a position to require additional funding because of their unique situation as opposed to larger centers. Any comments there? I found it to be some rather compelling points that were made in that letter myself. All had a letter there as well, June 12th. And then the assessment, or the performance assessment letter for our chief of police, June 1st. A positive review, I would suggest. At least I have that ready from Commission Chair. And move on to committee reports and minutes from the Waste Services Commission, our minutes from April 28th. Any questions with that? And the Star Catholic Board highlights from June of 2021. That is all of the information that was put forward on this agenda. We have a motion. Apparently not. Councillor Gullikson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that we accept the reports as information.
Thank you. All those in favor? Very good, that was unanimous. Individual councillor reports. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Lacombe Regional Tourism, we're undergoing our strat plan discussion starting. Regional tourism has taken some great steps moving forward, so a lot of positives with that. Lacombe Days, I could ask everybody if you could, we are currently updating all the events on the website. Please look at info@lacombedays.ca. This has been very challenging recently, and yeah, it's coming together, but last week was not fun. But anyways, yeah, it's coming together. I would just ask everybody to keep watching info@lacombedays.ca because we're updating a website, and the advertising on expanded social media and radio will start taking place shortly. So
just to make sure that everybody heard that website address that's got all the Lacombe Days information, lacombedays.ca.
my apologies, info@lacombedays.ca. So new events is the scavenger hunt. We've spent a few $1,000s on prizes for youth or anybody who participates in that one. Beer and wings in front of the LMC. And the fireworks will be at the track on 2. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you reiterating the online presence for Lacombe Days. It's a great way for our administration and council to point everyone to lacombedays.ca. And if there's any specific information, they can feel free to email info@lacombedays.ca. Very good. I know it's been normally probably closer to a year-long process to organize this particular event for yourself, Councillor Gullickson and others. We certainly appreciate you sticking with it, putting in the extra time and effort and trying to do it in a condensed fashion. I know it's bound to create an extreme high level of stress, but thank you very much. I know the community will be very appreciative when it comes all together. So we wish you the best, and certainly reach out to anyone on council if there's something that we can help with. And I know that administration remains to be helpful. So as much as there are resources, I know a great deal of it still falls upon the committee. And just thanks again. Councillor Hibbs, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment and a question. Yeah, I would echo that people are pretty excited about the idea that Lacombe Days is actually going ahead. So I really hope they turn out and the weather's great. And I think everybody's going to be aware that's a slightly pared down event this year, but just yay that we're able to even do stuff like that again. So that's awesome. I do have a question, however, about the fireworks. So this year is going to be a little different with it being out at Track on 2. And I have had feedback as far as concerns about parking, because obviously it's, you could potentially be getting large crowds, and can the facility accommodate that?
Yes, there is significant open area to the north of the Track on 2 buildings. We will be having volunteer groups direct parking, so there is a significant wide open field there. I don't know, I'm estimating 25, 30 acres. So like that has been addressed. We'll have we've been making donations to nonprofit groups where needed for volunteers. So yeah, that has been addressed. And we've had some wonderful support from Caroline Kurt Bellick and Ross Morrison. So we've topped off the fireworks significantly compared to other years, recognizing that we're trying to enhance the events that we do have. So, and we're reaching out more for the parade floats in wider area. We're hoping that floats come from a wider, vast areas. We're reaching out past Edmonton and Calgary. So, yeah, it's yeah. Any more questions are greatly appreciated. So.
Thank you, Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Can I assume that we're going to fire up the City of Lacombe float? And then we'll get that in the parade and we'll have the opportunity to participate. Yes, maybe?
The cold float was disposed of 2 years ago. So I apologize, we will not be able to fire it up. What was the lifespan on the float?
It was originally 5 to 7 years, 2011.
Were we made, sorry, were we made aware of that? I wasn't sure we had gotten rid of that float.
Yes, I apologize if you weren't aware, but yes, that was disposed of some time ago.
So if I could speak further now, like all due respect, if there is any council members wishing to be part of a float, I will try for convertible cars. I did lose the Parisian Horse Club because they have a horse show elsewhere, but I've been able to find other horse-drawn wagons and carriages. I've found a few, but if councillors want to be in convertibles or wish to participate, you know, in the front as we try to accommodate area mayors, MLA, and the MP has his own float, try to accommodate neighboring mayors and to the best of what we can. So Sonia Beclaire is my contact for surrounding mayors and dignitaries. So if councils want to go together, awesome. We'll try to accommodate that. So.
Councillor Hibbs?
Yeah, I also was not aware of that, and that actually is a little bit of a concern for me. So I think that that's a discussion that we need to have, maybe not tonight, but I think something needs to be done. We can't not be in our own parade. That is actually quite ridiculous, honestly. I don't even care if we're carrying the flag and we're handing out candy. I don't know. I think that we need to have as strong a presence as possible. Even if we throw together some sort of float, heck, I'll volunteer to work on it, but we need to have something. Maybe it's not going to be what we've had in the past, but having nothing is not acceptable. And I certainly don't want to just drive in a vehicle that I won't do that.
Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Through to Councillor Ross. We're going to have horse-drawn carriages, is that not correct, or wagons? Or dignitaries?
I'm getting a few confirmations. I'm kind of doing a lot of begging and.
Yeah, but if we do have that, I mean, we could have all of council that's available ride on a wagon with signage. Are we going to have signage for the councillors?
That's up to each individual. Like I'll try to accommodate the best I can. Obviously, you can get a.
Maybe we put our campaign signs on the side of the wagons.
Yeah, like all due respect, like for example, the Widener family has a number of antiques that maybe with their permission you could dress it up as a float. That's just an option, right? I'm just throwing ideas out, but do as you wish as a group. That's sorry, but Councillor Gullickson.
Well, I'm just, you and I are at the end of the parade anyway.
Yeah.
The way things are, and I'm going to have my truck and I'm going to put signs on the side. Is Lacombe Days providing the signs, or do we have to get our own?
Typically, everybody has got their own, and that's, yeah. I'm not providing anybody with any signage. That's your choice.
Yeah.
I've had enough of this, actually.
I think it would be extremely unusual for Lacombe Days, and certainly not the city of Lacombe, to supply signage.
Right, we have our own sign.
Yes. Very good. Councillor Connick, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll have a written report for next meeting. I did want to just quickly, I did do the tour of the hotel downtown. I would strongly encourage all the remaining members of council to take on that tour, to reach out to Darcy or Ken and take that tour through Guy, I'm guessing, but it's quite remarkable what they've done there. Actually, I was truly impressed with the work that they've done there to date. The 2 floors of affordable housing, they have 1 suite there that's done already, and it is I mean, I would live there. I mean, I don't qualify, but I mean, it's really nice. And those suites will be quite nice. And then what they've envisioned for the main floor there is kind of a hub for the downtown, and they have some ideas. You know, Echo Energy is looking as like a business incubator. They're hoping to attract a few other, perhaps the chamber. Anyways, it's all speculation at this point, but that will be quite something as well. I mean, they've taken great pains. You know, they're going to make shadow boxes with some of the artifacts they found. They found 3 works of art behind the walls there that they've painstakingly removed, and they're going to rehang in there. So they've done tremendous job there, and I would strongly encourage the rest of council to try and reach out and get a tour, because it's going to be quite nice. I'm really impressed. I mean, they're not going to do anything on the exterior because lack of funds, of course, but what they're doing on the inside is truly, it's going to be quite nice. So I just want to reach out. Everyone should try and check it out, get a tour done, and take a look. It's going to be quite something.
Thanks, Councillor Connick. Questions for him? Councillor Jacobson. Councillor Hibbs.
I don't have a formal report. I did submit that at the last meeting. If anybody has any questions for me, that would be fine. But I do want to pass on the fact that I have been hearing a lot about the railway accident in particular. But of course, speaking of, and we mentioned this earlier already in the meeting, that also brings up all the other issues, which is not so much whistle cessation, but definitely those ties. They were curious about crossings, and then also the weeds that continue to be an issue. So just for clarification, we will be seeking another meeting at some point in the near future to address those. I did notice that the railway accident recently occurred outside of our municipal boundaries. But it was interesting that it was the municipality that was kind of getting focused on as far as like you were, making a comment, et cetera, et cetera. I was just curious, like how that is, considering that it actually was outside of our municipality. Yes, we're the closest like urban center, I guess, but it actually was in the county, and nobody from the county, I don't believe, had a comment on that. So curious why the media focused on the city.
I think likely because when they showed up at the city, were called responders responding to it. They just jumped in.
And so again, we will be included when they do find, the reasons for what happened. That I assume that will be shared with us at that point, as it will be probably with the public at large. Is that the communication you're getting from the railway, I guess is what I'm asking?
I'm of the same understanding. I don't know that I would say it's from communication we received from the railway, but yes, I expect there will be a publicly released debrief. And if there is the opportunity for a one-on-one debriefing or some additional detail, given that our department was the responding team on scene, I'm very hopeful that we can have that inside information as well. But I don't know that.
Just because I think that is a large concern in our community. That was awful close. Had that just been a little earlier along the track, it could have been a different situation. So I think that we are entitled to having those answers so that we can then, provide that to the public. They need some reassurance as to what happened, and if there are steps that the municipality needs to take, if there are any available to us, to avoid such a situation should occur, like within our own boundaries. And then the only other topic that I have recently that I've been hearing, I've gotten a few questions on, and I didn't have the answer because it was news to me until I went to go look, was Barnett Lake. And again, we mentioned that earlier today. So again, just for clarification, that is not something that the city has entered into. That is a county agreement with the energy company. And yeah, so we've had nothing to do with that. That is a completely separate thing. If people have concerns about what is going on out there, then they should be contacting the county. Is that correct?
The county or the provincial authority for it, which is ultimately responsible for issuing the permits.
Alberta Environment, then right. That would be? Okay.
Actually, Alberta Energy Regulator.
Alberta Energy Regulator. Okay, well, that's good information to have. Okay. For those that have maybe not been out there, I did send a couple of pictures that I took, just so that you can sort of see the amount of water that's being removed from there is quite significant, so I can see why people are potentially quite upset, and especially given at the time of year that it is, kind of midsummer, you're still having, you know, small animals that are potentially nesting, et cetera, still, I can see why there's a little bit of concern, so. But good to know that I did not miss something, that it was a county and energy company agreement. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's certainly not within the municipal boundaries of the city of Macomb. And as far as the environmental aspects, some of which you alluded to, those types of considerations do form part of the consideration for the permits. And when I was contacted by several individuals about that very project, I suggested that I would look into it, and in fact, it does have their proper authority to do what they've done there. And while I felt obligated as a representative of the city of Macomb to look into it, we have no authority with that or jurisdiction over that project whatsoever. However, in saying that, I am confident that they have adhered to the guidelines that they are required to follow. So I believe it's a non-issue for the city of Macomb at this particular point in time. I think that's all the reports that we have. Line Chief Dowdy? There you go.
My report.
I would be happy to give just a little bit further update on the float after council adults.
Certainly. Councilor Goldson, my apologies. I started with the electronic. Exactly. So if you'd care to finish up with reports, please.
Thank you. I had MPC meetings June 16th and July 7th. They're interesting with the mall development and a shop with a side yard variance with conditions. Also, Lacombe Days meetings. I'd also like to express my appreciation for the work that Councillor Ross has done towards this Lacombe Days. If it wasn't for him, it would not happen this year. So he does deserve a lot of credit. And I think it's going to be one of the best ones ever. And also worked the farmers markets on June 25th and July 2nd and enjoyed that very much and had a lot of positive input, especially from people from out of town. I think we should take that as something that's really important to us. People from Edmonton and Calgary appreciate our community sometimes more than we do ourselves.
Thank you for that. Chief Dowdy.
Okay, so I just had a quick discussion virtually with Guy about the director about the float. And he has reminded me that actually we planned on scrapping it, but we wanted to run it by council first because we were nervous that the council wouldn't be happy to see it scrapped. So it is actually sitting dusty in a garage somewhere. The issue is it was purchased with a 5 to 7 year span, and there was to be $5,000 reserve contributions starting in 2011 to replace this. Those reserve contributions were continuously cut from the budget due to budget constraints, priorities. And so no investments have been made. It's past its lifespan. It is starting to need show signs of disrepair, and we aren't in a position to replace it at this time. However, we will do I think the main concern was packing it up, driving it out somewhere, unpacking it, and that was starting to really wear on it. To use it within our own community, I don't guarantee it, but I'm fairly confident we get something that's usable for our own purposes, because I agree. In the city, we should have it. So good job to us for foreseeing the problem, not scrapping it. Thank you for reminding me.
And a better job yet of the shock and awe for council thinking that the float had been destroyed without their knowledge. It's all good, so hopefully we can resurrect the float and make it presentable for the community. And I'm sure that several councillors and perhaps some staff will be interested in accompanying it through the break. Thank you for that update. This evening, in addition to the in-camera, we've still got our minutes to do, and I think we'll go to those now. Unless, did we already accept reports as information? If not, we should do that.
We did.
Did, we're good? Okay. Our June 28th regular council meeting minutes then. You all had an opportunity to review them. Any questions or concerns?
Sorry, I'm flipping around. Are we on the minutes now?
Correct. Councillor Hibbs?
Yes, so, oops, sorry, I just skipped to the right page. There we go. All right, so I will note that I was absent for that one, so therefore I could not have passed, or sorry, moved a motion. So on the second page, yes, second page, it says that I moved the Heritage Resources Committee update, clearly not. So I don't know who that would have been, but that's the only error that I noticed.
So we will have that corrected for the next.
It was Councillor Hoekstra, sorry.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Yeah.
Very good.
While I was here with you in spirit, I was certainly not in that capacity to make any motions. I would, however, move that we accept the minutes as amended.
Thank you. Any additional revisions required? All those in favor? As amended, thank you. All right, so our next meetings, all at 5 p.m. Regular council meeting on August the 9th, here in the Kinsman Room. And again, on, for a council committee meeting on Monday, August 16th. And then a regular council meeting again on September the 13th. So I'll put those in your calendars and consider that opportunity for the public to chime in as those agendas become available for those dates as well. We do have a couple of in-camera items, both to do with land concerns. Do I have a motion? Councillor Jacobson?
Move it on camera.
Thank you. Motion to go in camera at 7:43. All those in favor?